Good morning, everybody. So glad that you are here. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict and personality clashes. And today, I am so excited. I'm interviewing one of my favorite people, Sally Z. Sally, introduce yourself.
Yay. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Sally Z, and Jen is one of my fabulous speakers. I'm an award-winning speaker and speaker coach, and I empower big-hearted entrepreneurs like Jen. Oops, other way. Like Jen.
Which way am I going?
To step out front and share her signature story in a way that moves audiences and in a way that builds her authority, her revenue, all the good things that we want to tap into speaking to do, even if you don't consider yourself a speaker.
I love that. And one of the things that I really wanted to interview Sally for a couple of reasons. One is I have had a ton of you ask me questions about how did you build a TEDx talk? How did you get a TEDx talk? How did you feel about your TEDx talk? Like all these questions about the TEDx that I did just a couple weeks ago. It's not out yet. I promise I'll let you know when it does. But I wanted to interview Sally because the reason I have a TEDx, it was really birthed inside the Signature Talk studio and how to really build a talk. So a little bit about my story. I am not one of the people who is afraid to get out front. It's one of my favorite things. Give me a microphone. And I'm very, very happy. But what I didn't know really how to do was build a talk that was sustainable for me because I had a lot of natural talents. I was a teacher. I could get up and do a lot of work around the content that I know about. Like the authority that I had was really real, but I was leaning so much into my talent. It was exhausting, first of all. And two, it wasn't repeatable. I couldn't rebuild it. I didn't know how to make it so it had the right stories in it. And I kept leaning into teaching. And so what Sally helped me understand was the power of a story. Like I always told stories, but I think I told stories that might have been a little bit rambly and didn't lead people where I wanted them to go. I mean, that could possibly have happened. And so I really wanted Sally to tell us a little bit about the power of a story. So Caro is here. I know a couple other people were going to show up today. Let us know if you've got questions. Put them in the chat. I think it's that way. If you're on your phone, it's down there. But let us know what questions you have. So Sally, tell us a little bit about the power of a signature story and what that even means.
Well, that's a great question because there's lots of terms around speaking that can feel a little bit intimidating and a little bit like, oh, well, I just speak sometimes. I don't think I could do that. Okay, so right off the bat, I just want to let everybody know, even if you're not a Jen who can easily get up and kind of has these natural gifts that you really want to get out front, even if that's not you, we all know how important and powerful it is to step out front. Okay. I remember back when 20 years ago, I started speaking in front of high school kids and middle school kids, young people. And we all know what an incredibly tough audience they can be. They are going to let you know
immediately.
They're going to be like, I don't buy it, right? So you really have to show up authentically and you have to know how to engage them and keep them right with you because we had these big ideas, all this teaching you're talking about, Jen. We all come to the moment with, we have something we want to share. We have an idea. We know our stuff. We are here because we are experts, but showing up and getting people engaged in those ideas, that's hard, but that is where the story comes in. And I remember the moment standing in front of 150 eighth graders and feeling so frustrated because they weren't really listening. They weren't taking it in. You know, you can tell kind of like they're a little squirrely. And I thought, I need to move my story up. The story was coming, but I needed to move my story up. And that is the trick. When we place a story and we tell the story in the right way, it is the persuasive tool. It is the magic that pulls people in to your idea and all of the beautiful things that you want to share. The story is the way. So we build what I call a signature story that lives in a signature talk. Don't worry about the talk piece, because at this point, it's really what is the signature story that's going to pull people into your idea? And can you tell it in a way that really engages and pulls people in? And I know how to do that. And so that's what I've been helping people do for the last 20 years.
I love that. I love that you knew a couple things. One is you have an audience that's going to let you know. Sometimes adults were just really polite and they'll sit there and stare at you and they're like totally off in la la land. And now you can't even tell sometimes if you're on a Zoom if people are engaged or not. And
Right.
so you don't have that feedback all the time. But what I love about a story is two things. One is that it is the personification. Well, that's not totally the right word, but it is the epitome. That's the right word of show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to be lectured. We all are wired for story. And so when we can tell a story, one of the things that you taught me was that they feel it before we tell it. And so that story really is the show, don't tell. And then the other part about the story is the stickiness of it. So that's what that stays with them later. They're not going to totally remember what I say. Unfortunately, your client, your team, they're not going to remember your exact words. So when you say, I told them that, they are not going to know exactly verbatim what you said, but they will remember the feeling in the story.
Oh my gosh.
That's what's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up those 2 points. My husband just brought me
Oh, yay, Andy.
a coffee. Thank you. Okay. And it's in my TEDx cup. Oh, from back in my day. Yes. So yes, those two pieces are so powerful. And it's, we tend to, you brought something up earlier that I want to circle back to, because you were talking about how exhausted you were in recreating your content again and again and again. And it is exhausting, and it's panic inducing, because we're not sharing vetted content. We're sharing new content that we're hoping works. And we only learn that in the moment, truly. And so when we can write and deliver a story that does exactly what you're talking about, Jen, and we can place it in our business, whatever that is, we can place it in a way that we can lean on it to be repeatable and scalable. It helps us become profitable. So it can truly be all of those things. So when you find a story that you can use and it highlights and leads to those things that you're talking about, it's going to make it stickier, right? And it does all the heavy lifting for you. It's like, we don't have to do as much of the teaching, because so much of the teaching happens in the story. Now, we still want to do the teaching because we're hired to show up and share insight and perspective. And so we don't just tell a story, we follow that story up with the point that you're making, and the articulation of that point is where the speaker differentiation comes in. So I just threw a lot in there. I wanted to tie all those things together.
No, it was really good. So one of the things when I was applying for TEDx's and wanting to have that opportunity to really share my big idea, because there is an authority building piece to TEDx, but it's also, this is the idea. This is what I want people to know.
Yeah.
And when I switched my application to be less about here are my points and to more about here is the story, that's when I started getting interest. And I think that that's a really important point. And even after I was doing my final rehearsal with the TEDx committee, and they were making some comments, and they're like, I kind of missed the story that you told us in your application. And I had to think back. I was like, what is that story? Well, it was a shorter version of my kind of origin story, founder story, that idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's still in there. It's just not at the top. And so we kind of talked about what that was like, but that's what they remembered. Yeah. They remembered the story even from the application.
Yeah.
And then I have this one little part of my talk where I use a children's story. It's not even my story. It's one that people use in a children's story. And that is one of the things they're like, I'm going to remember about going through conflict because of the bear hunt. I love the bear hunt. And so it's just like, you can use your
Yes.
signature story in all kinds of ways, but the power of story is that it's sticky.
Yeah.
And so go ahead. I was going to see, well, blah, 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 blah. How
I
about
think
that for being, it's live,
love
folks.
it.
And
There's
clearly
so
we're
much
more
to
talking.
say, really, but I think it's important to note that when we talk about a signature story, it can feel like I have to find the one story that's going to encapsulate everything. But truly, it's finding a story that highlights and articulates the point that you want to make, and really finessing that and telling it in a way that you know is going to work for your audience in that context. So we find a handful of stories, right? And we put them together and pair them together in a structure and towards a strategy. Those are the pieces. So you've got your story, you've got some structure, and then you really want to put it together into a strategy, because when all of those things come together, then it becomes a tool for you and your business that you can take with you on the TEDx stage, right? And all of these situations require a little adaptation, of course. We're not just rinsing and repeating. We do want to meet the audience where they're at. But a TEDx, a keynote, your Facebook Lives or your LinkedIn Lives here, what is the point that you want to make? So you learn these tools, and you can take this talk that you have and the story that you have, and you pull it up and you say, okay, how can I adapt it for this moment right here? And I'm just curious, did you ever have any worries about repeating your content?
I was just going to ask you this question. So, two quick things. Well, one quick thing, and then that's my question. I'm thinking about Hannah and Maria and Caro, and they all have very different jobs and what they do, but it's always about telling the story to their clients. So they, donors or coaching clients or people like that, like telling the story is what pulls people in. So that signature story can be used over and over. And then that fear comes in of like, well, is it authentic if I keep saying it over and over? Or is it authentic if if I've structured the story? Does it lose that authenticity? So talk about that for a
Yeah.
little bit.
I think it's a totally worthwhile question to ask. And it's an important one. Like, if we don't feel like we can show up authentically in the moment, that is a huge red flag that you've got to pay attention to. But my pushback on this is that a repeated, consistent message is how you become known around an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that everybody is watching and hearing everything that we're doing. You're not.
I know. And sometimes you're like, wah, wah. I wish you
Totally.
were.
It's hard. It's really, and it can be like really deflating. Be like, I feel like I'm talking about this all the time. I've been doing this work for 20 plus years and taking it online for a handful of years. And when you go online and you're showing up and you're doing these messages all the time, I feel like, doesn't everybody know this yet? Because I keep talking about the same things. And it's like, A, not everybody hears it. B, sometimes people need to hear it multiple times in slightly different ways in order for it to sink in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good warning thing, because at some point you do need to mix it up, right? But getting to that point is years in the making. It's not, I already did this once or even a handful of times.
Yes. Right.
So it's good to repeat. And the repetition allows you to get to mastery in your delivery. So it's actually a really powerful part of the process.
Jackie Hill Perry is one of my favorite teachers, spoken word artists. And I was at a conference with her a couple of years ago, and this stuck with me in the middle of her story, that repetition is a mercy. And I just loved that. They're like, we think, well, I've just delivered. It's like pizza delivery. There it is. But really, the repetition is a mercy, because when we think about us as an audience member, I don't remember everything someone says to me.
No.
And I don't expect that I should. So why do I expect that my audience is going to be annoyed if I am merciful by repeating something? Exactly. And that repetition is a mercy is so important in how we tell our stories.
I love that. I wrote that down, Jen.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Repetition is a mercy. So I'm curious, Steffi, or Hannah, or Maria, or Cara, if you have questions for Sally, please pop them in the chat. We'll answer them. I'm going to keep asking my questions because, well, I'm in charge now. But I love the idea of adjusting the story. And I think about the fact as a parent and talking to kids or my family, the importance of a signature story is what we remember. So the story of our family, or the story of an organization, or the story of your business, the story that gets repeated is what builds a culture. And that is what is so powerful about a repeatable story. As you said, it's what you get known around. And several of us have our own online businesses. Others of us work within an organization. But either one of those places, the story that gets repeated is what builds the culture.
Absolutely.
And so how do you help people clearly, I was very excited to get a TEDx. That's always what I've wanted to do. It's very fun. I applied for another, that's me. Not everybody wants to do that type of work. So what's the power of a signature story for the leader in an organization, or an entrepreneur who is working their own business?
Well, it becomes the core of your messaging toolbox. It is the heart of it. So you have been referencing what I call an origin story. That is a powerful story that everybody needs to know what their origin story is around an idea. You might have several origin stories. So for Jen, her origin story is about why did she get into conflict, like as a passion and a purpose for herself. Like, where did that come from? We all have a story at the beginning of our why. Like, where did that start for you? That story is so important for employees. It's so important, like what you're talking about with culture. It's so important for new people to understand who you are, what your why is. They as you're listening, you're asking yourself, does that resonate with me? Have I been in a situation like that? Is this a person that would understand my life? Because built into story is resonance and connection. And so origin stories are one kind of story. There's lots of different kinds of stories. I have a few favorites, but that is such a powerful example of how transformative and culture building it can be. And it's just an incredible way to introduce yourself because people will remember it. So I read a stat the other day. It was 22%. People are, it's not 22%.
That's not the statistic. We're gonna rewind.
It's 22 times. People are 22 times more likely to remember what you're talking about when you pair it with a story. 22 times.
Wow. Like every business person in the world, let's 10x your business. Like that's the kind of thing.
Like
22 times more likely.
We're going to 22 times your impact by finding a story that illustrates and upholds not just the point that you want to make, but who you are, who your business is, who your company is. Like these are, it's powerful. It's not, we kind of poo-poo it like, oh, it's personal. It's like, this is a business. Like, you want your business to fly. You want people to be engaged. You want people to care about what it is that you're talking about. You have to tell a story.
So good. So Maria has this question. What is the best opening of a TED Talk you've ever heard?
Oh
what's
my
the
gosh.
best opening?
That's a great question.
I have my favorite TED Talk, but I don't know if my favorite TED Talk has the best opening.
So I personally love my opening.
I actually love Sally's opening. So I'm just going to set the scene. Sally walks out onto the TEDx stage. It's dark. There's a slide and Sally doesn't talk. So you tell the rest of the story. I love this story.
I wanted to share the inner dialogue of what people are thinking when they step out front to speak. So it was like, oh gosh, here I go. Whew, okay, no big deal. You can do this. Take a few deep breaths. Like I'm just standing there. And so there's a voiceover going. So I very intentionally was like, I want to start this talk unlike any other TED Talk that I've ever seen. And now I have not seen every TED Talk, so I'm sure there are better openings, but I really, really was excited about that opening. So let me just say that. But the other one that I'm thinking of is, I'm trying to remember her name. It's killing me now. Oh my gosh. She has the brain tumor. It's old. It's old.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben Zander, Maria. You are not wrong. He's absolutely one of my all-time favorite speakers. Where's his book? Have you read his book, The Art of Possibility? I give that book to my speakers all the time because it is so powerful, mind shifting, so good. I love Ben Zander. I got to watch him speak live, and he is a delight. This is somebody who comes alive on stage, just so beautiful. Okay. Oh, I can't remember her name, but she has a stroke. It's called a stroke of genius. And I just remember an actual brain being brought out on stage.
Yes.
But that's one of my favorite talks. It's a little odd, honestly. It's a little odd, but it is her storytelling. Basically, her entire talk is a story, which most of us, we don't have that. We're not going to approach it like that. But this story needed every single moment. We needed to walk with her as she was going through this unbelievable experience where she's a brain scientist having a stroke. And so she was aware of what was happening as it was happening in and out of consciousness.
It's a great talk.
Isn't it?
It's a really good talk. So we are running out of time, as I've just realized. If you want to know more from Sally, she is doing a fantastic webinar today. So the first link that I dropped in there is what's that called? The Sally's talk. I dropped that one, but this is to her webinar today that is about creating a signature story. So tell us a little bit about what the webinar is about and what people are going to get from this training today.
Sure. Yes. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I see the process of stepping out front with a message that really moves your audience. A really story-driven message takes 3 parts. You have your story, right? And then you have the part where most people arrive with, which is your expertise. Like, here's what I know, here's all the points I want to make, right? That is the structure. So we want to pair the story and the structure together. And then we want to think about, are we using it intentionally? Are we really leveraging this incredible power of speaking and story to grow our audience, to engage an audience, and ultimately to bring them into our business and help us make a little more revenue? And a little, it could be a little, it could be a lot. If you're really, really cranking on your speaking, it can be incredibly powerful for your business. So I talk about those 3 elements and what makes, so your story, and you guys show up with your structure, but I want to talk about the story and the strategy piece. What makes a story wow worthy? What makes it one of those beautiful moments that pulls people in, that where we can really leverage the brain science around storytelling so that it is doing what we want it to do? So we want to make it wow worthy, and then we want to make it business building. So I'm going to talk about those 2 aspects in the webinar today. So there's one today at 3 p.m. Central Time, and tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. And it's the same thing, it's just 2 different options on timing. And if you can't make it, I do have a replay, but I would of course love to see people there live.
I adore Sally's trainings. So Sally's been my speaker coach now for almost 2 years. Yeah, almost 2 years. And I will still go to some of her free trainings.
I know.
Because I just need the refresher. It's so, so good. And so if you were at all interested about how do you start to use story in your business, if you are inside an organization, you probably have to talk to your boss about something or present to people. If you are in any kind of client-facing business where you have to present an idea, this is such a powerful way to show your ideas, and people will connect with you in a way that makes you as we know in business, they know, like, and trust you, and stories help build that know, like, and trust factor.
Absolutely.
So Sally is excellent at teaching that. So I hope that you go today. She's so good at that. If you've got any more questions for Sally, if you are catching this on the replay, please drop them in the comments, send us a DM. You have to connect with Sally on LinkedIn or on Instagram, other places that you hang out. She has a fantastic Facebook group called the Emerging Speaker Society that has all kinds of great training in it as well. So I hope that you connect with Sally, because she has been a light and a catalyst in my career and just a dear friend now. And so she's just so helpful and in anybody's business, if you're an entrepreneur, especially helping you build that idea of speaking as a revenue generating idea in your business. So connect with Sally, go to the webinar today or tomorrow. It is an excellent training on how to create that wow-worthy story.
I promise to make it worthy of your time.
Absolutely. Nothing Sally does.
It's always my goal. I know people's time is so precious, and we spend a lot of time on Zoom and in these trainings. So I want to make sure that when you show up, you're going to soak every last little bit up out of it. And I want to give you as much as I can.
Absolutely. All right, everybody.
P.S. David's right. It's Jill Bolte Taylor.
Oh, there we go. David
Nice
Bolte.
David.
Pulling out the information. Well done, sir. All right, everybody. I hope that you have a fantastic Thursday, and connect with Sally. Make sure you jump on that webinar. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.